The drama surrounding Anthony Joshua's preparation has reached a point where every training clip, every whispered rumor, and every shift in his camp feels like part of a new story in the strange, evolving world of modern boxing. It begins in the gym, where Joshua moves with a calm, disciplined seriousness, studying the rhythm of each punch as if engraving it into muscle memory. His coach guides him through footwork patterns and explosive combinations, reminding him that a fighter's job is simple: throw punches with purpose, think like a predator, move like a shadow. The sound of gloves hitting pads echoes against the walls, sharp and steady. Joshua absorbs each instruction, applying it with the intensity of a man who is shaping himself for a challenge the world still struggles to comprehend. The conversation around his training grew louder when news broke that Joshua had been studying and applying techniques from Mike Tyson's old-school regimen. Not just the famous peek-a-boo movement or the devastating body-to-head combinations, but the raw physical conditioning that made Tyson's style so destructive. Joshua introduced neck bridges into his training, a dangerous but effective drill Tyson used to strengthen the very muscles that absorb and deliver force. It was a commitment that showed how deeply Joshua was willing to go in reshaping his body for maximum durability. Even his own physio watched nervously, knowing how risky the exercise was, yet witnessing firsthand how much Joshua wanted to embody the intensity of the greats he idolized. Joshua spoke openly about the inspiration Tyson gave him. He admired Tyson's discipline, his focus, and the way his strength seemed to come from an obsession with preparation. Tyson, in turn, gave Joshua advice rooted in experience. Stay active, stay fighting, because long layoffs dull even the best fighters. Tyson believed Joshua had the talent to dominate, as long as he refused discouragement and refused to quit. It was the type of mentorship that connected two eras of heavyweight greatness, drawing a line between the past and the present through shared work ethic and shared hunger. Inside the camp, Joshua looked sharper and more confident than ever. His punches were crisp. His conditioning was improving. His understanding of timing and range deepened. Whether fans loved or hated the idea of Joshua facing Jake Paul, Joshua himself took the situation seriously. He wasn't training like it was a circus. He wasn't preparing like it was a spectacle. He understood that regardless of who was standing on the opposite side of the ring, he had a responsibility to show the world that he was still one of the most disciplined and dangerous heavyweights on the planet. At the same time, the business side of boxing began to shape the narrative. Eddie Hearn openly acknowledged the reality. The money Jake Paul was offering was massive, even by heavyweight standards. Joshua had already faced the best of his era, already carried the weight of the sport on his shoulders, already conquered stadiums and achieved world champion status twice. Now, at this stage of his career, a financial opportunity this large made perfect sense. The numbers being whispered behind closed doors were staggering, figures that could double or triple what Joshua made fighting elite contenders. Hearn argued that prizefighting has always been about both glory and earnings, and this matchup offered both, albeit in a very unusual way. But not everyone was convinced that the fight should happen. Some critics argued that if Joshua destroyed Jake Paul the way he dismantled Francis Ngannou, the world would shrug and say it meant nothing. Others warned that letting Paul into the ring with a prime heavyweight like Joshua crossed a line of safety and professionalism. A few insisted that the fight could tarnish Joshua's legacy, questioning why a two-time unified world champion would face someone they considered unqualified to share the ring with him. Nigel Benn voiced frustration that the world of influencer boxing had created massive paydays for people who hadn't earned them through the traditional grind. As a man who lived through the brutal reality of the sport, he felt that real boxers were being overshadowed and underpaid while crossover performers took home millions. He called it unfair, a trend that undermined the sport he devoted his life to. But even he admitted that if fans were paying, promoters would keep making these fights, and fighters would keep accepting them. Others offered a different perspective. Some argued that with the Fury fight increasingly unlikely, due to retirement talk, negotiations stalling, and years of missed opportunities, the Jake Paul matchup was simply a product of timing. Joshua needed to return to the ring. The audience wanted a spectacle. The offer on the table was enormous. And Paul, looking to take the biggest gamble of his career, seemed ready to step into a challenge no one thought he would ever accept. As more analysts weighed in, the divide grew deeper. They acknowledged that Jake Paul had evolved from a social media entertainer into a more serious fighter. He trained hard. He studied technique. He faced fighters who were willing to push him. He showed power that surprised critics. But none of that changed the reality of standing across the ring from a 6'6" heavyweight who had knocked out world champions and survived wars against the most dangerous men of his generation. Even Tommy Fury, the man who handed Paul his biggest defeat, laughed at the idea of Paul stepping in with Joshua. To him, it wasn't disrespect, it was simply the truth. He knew Paul's strengths and weaknesses better than anyone. And he insisted that Joshua, even on his worst day, would overwhelm Paul with force that Paul had never imagined taking. Many agreed, calling it a mismatch that could only end one way. Still, the conversation continued. The media couldn't look away. Fans couldn't stop debating. And the numbers kept climbing. Talks of $100 million circulated. Negotiations remained active. And the spectacle grew bigger. By the end, it became clear that this fight, whether loved, hated, mocked, or celebrated, reflected the strange new era boxing had entered. An era where legacy and entertainment collided, where money shaped matchups, and where fighters like Jake Paul blurred the lines between spectacle and sport. And in the gym, away from the noise, Anthony Joshua kept training, focusing, learning, sharpening, preparing for whatever came next, whether it was a generational heavyweight showdown or a crossover fight that would dominate global headlines. His goal never changed: stay disciplined, stay ready, and remind the world why his name still carries the weight of a champion. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the build-up, let me know your thoughts below. Should Joshua take the fight, or is this matchup pushing boxing too far into entertainment territory? Do you think Jake Paul stands even a remote chance in the ring with AJ? Share your perspective in the comments, smash the like button, and be sure to subscribe for more dramatic boxing breakdowns just like this. Your engagement keeps the storytelling alive, and there's much more coming.